If you guys remember a few weeks ago, or I guess more than a month ago now, I did a video talking about my tier list for back row removal. You guys seem to like that video a lot, and I liked making it a lot, and I wanted to do a sequel, and I was pretty sure that I wanted to make a new video with the same sort of premise but on hand traps, but I wanted to wait not only for the new format but also for Ignition Assault. And now that Ignition Assault is pretty much legal just in a couple days here, I wanted to make this video now. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to look at some of the more popular hand traps, or I guess just hand traps that are like semi-relevant, and we're going to sort of put them on this tier list. And you can see my tier sort of markers here are staple, popular, good but specific, unpopular, and meh. So these are going to be sort of my opinion about what I feel for this month at least these hand traps are going to be. And I say that because, you know, Yu-Gi-Oh! And hand traps, they're always changing. You know, if something becomes really popular, whether or not it's like a deck or a certain sort of combo, one of these hand traps might become better or worse in the future. But this is pretty much going to be my opinion for February 2020, so going into this next month, and I think it's going to be sort of a good general sort of thing to go off of when you're thinking about building your own decks. So first off, we have Psyframe Gear Gamma. What a fantastic hand trap in past formats, but right now, I mean, not so much. We don't have a ton to go off of. We have the PPG Tour thing, and we don't really have regionals yet. They will be coming up this weekend and next weekend, and then we have the UDS and YCS Vegas, but for right now, it's looking like Gamma is going to be pretty unpopular. I almost put this in the good but specific category, but I feel like there's just not enough people playing this card. There was one Lunalight deck that was using a cool combo where they summoned Psyframe Lambda on their first turn and then search Gamma in the end phase, but for right now, at least for my prediction, Gamma is going to be pretty unpopular. Maybe if every single Lunalight deck was using that combo, I would put it in the good but specific category, but I really don't think that's going to happen, so we'll just put it in the unpopular category for now. Next up, we have Didi Crow, one of the most popular hand traps from last format, and no surprise here, this card is still very, very popular. Now, not every single hand trap that was good last format is going to be popular this format as well, but Didi Crow in particular seems really, really good. You really want to hit your opponent's master plan when they're trying to revive it, and Didi Crow is really good at that. I will say you want to be careful though, because if they like try to monster reborn it and they have a rescue mission in grave, they can just chain the rescue mission if you try to Didi Crow it, so watch out for that interaction. But in general, Didi Crow is a pretty good counter to a lot of the spiral combos, hitting the quick fix, hitting the master plan, stuff like that. It's not quite staple status, it's not going to be played in every single deck, but it is a go-to option, and spirals can actually search it with the Lyrilisk rank 1 monster, so it's going to be really popular in the upcoming weeks. Next up, we have Skullmeister, and this is, like I said, another card that was popular in the last format, but like I said, not every single popular card from last format is going to translate into this one, and I feel like Skullmeister is one of those cards that is not going to be very popular. While Orcus are probably still going to be around, I mean, people were still playing them at the PPG Tour, in general, they're not really that popular anymore, and Skullmeister doesn't have a lot of cards to stop. Generally speaking, one of the reasons that Skullmeister was so strong was because you could use it on the hard once per turn effects of the Orcus monsters. Now that Orcus are not going to be as popular though, at least that's my prediction right now, I don't think Skullmeister is going to be played that often. Maybe it'll get played, maybe it'll like get a huge resurgence, but if Spiral is going to end up being this popular as it was at the PPG, I don't see this card being played very much. Next up, we have Artifact Lancia, and once again, this feels really weird because this card has been around in the metagame for like a year straight, where it's been a staple side deck option for almost every single deck. This card, unfortunately, like Skullmeister, is probably not going to be very popular going forward. Yes, it is not the worst card, but you don't really have as many Thunder Dragon players around, if any. I mean, that deck is just kind of dead now that Colossus is banned, and that card was pretty good against that deck, but more importantly, you're not going to see as many Orcus around, and it's really hard dedicating 3 side deck spots for a card that is going to be only good against a matchup that you might not play against. Next up, we have Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, a card that saw play sort of on and off again over the past several formats. It's been good against some decks and some matchups, but not nearly as popular as it has been in the past. However, I do think for this upcoming format, this card is a decent choice, not the best choice, but it's pretty decent. I'm going to put it in the good but specific category. You probably won't see it even in the majority of side decks, at least with the way that the format is going right now. It used to be one of the best hand traps against the Spiral deck back when that deck was like tier 0 2 years ago, or almost 3 years ago now, and not so much anymore. You know, now that they only have one field spell, and now that they don't rely on double helix as much as they used to, this card is not nearly as powerful, but it still is a pretty good option. It also has a few other applications. You can use it against IP Masquerena, that's pretty good. You can use it against pendulums in a couple sort of situations, but in general, it's probably not going to be very popular, but just sort of middle of the road. Next up, we have Spooky Dogwood. You know, it is a Ghost Girl hand trap. It is a card that has a few tops under its belt. Do I think this card will be very good this format? I mean, no, it's just in the meh category. I think it would be really, really difficult for this card to ever be in any other category, even in like the unpopular one, just because no one's gonna play this card at a really competitive level. I mean, even against the FTK strategies, you'd rather just do something like Drone Lockbird or something to stop the combo from happening. You don't really want to just gain a bunch of life points. Generally speaking, cards that you want to side deck into only for winning in time haven't been very good in the past. We have a couple extra deck monsters that have been played for that, but as far as hand traps go, like this one, or I guess Firecracker could also be in that category, they just have not been very good and probably won't be unless something really drastic happens. Next up, we have Ghost Belle and Haunted Mansion, and you know, I'm a huge fan of this card. I thought it was really underused last format and the format before that, but right now it's not looking very good for this card. You know, there were a lot of interactions last format that made this card really cool. You know, you could stop a Thunder Dragon Hawk, and that prevented your opponent from summoning Colossus because it negates activations. And there were a couple other situations where this card specifically was really good because it stopped activations and didn't just negate the effect like Ash Blossom, but I just do not see a lot of applications for this card. I think Didi Crow is a lot better this format because you don't just want to stop one graveyard effect, you want to banish a card with something like Didi Crow instead. And then we have No Material, and this card is kind of weird because it's in the back of people's minds. You know, they're always like, well, if a combo deck gets too crazy, you can side this card and kind of stop them, and it was particularly useful against Nightmare Mermaid because you would lock the Phoenix or the Cerberus in the extra monster zone. I will say this card is going to get a lot worse with Master Rule 5, but that's not really what we're focusing on for today's video. We're only focusing on February 2020, and for right now, I think it's okay. It's in the good but specific category. I think it's decent enough against Spiral, but not quite impactful enough to be staple or even super popular. The only decks that can really take advantage of it are decks that can OTK, and while Spiral mirror matches do want to OTK their opponent, they're not always going to go for No Material. You know, I know Aaron Furman played it at his, he finished 3rd place at the PPG, and he said it was like not super great and that he'd try to cut it for something else. And I think it's just better hand traps in general for Spiral, and it's not really that applicable against other matchups. This format, I know it looks like it's going to be Spiral Tier 0. I don't know if that's going to be the case though. We only have that one event to go off of. Really, really specific cards like No Material might just not be good enough to put in a side deck because we really don't know which type of decks you'll be going against at a regional qualifier, and even against a deck that it works against, Spiral, you have probably way better options out there, so I don't think this card will be very popular. Next up, we have Effect Veiler, and this is one of those cards, sort of like Ghost Ogre, that at points is like the best hand trap, but at other points is really, really unplayable, and right now I think it's in that second category. I do not think Effect Veiler is very good. I'm sure it'll still see play, maybe a little bit, and it certainly will get better in the future whenever we eventually get that Predaplant Link monster, but for right now, I'm just not seeing this card being very good against any matchup. Against Spiral, most of the cards can't be targeted. Against these slower control decks, it's not very impactful. You'd rather have other cards like back row removal, so I don't really see a spot in this upcoming meta for Effect Veiler, at least not for the next couple weeks. Next up, we have Dimension Shifter, a card that I feel in theory is very good against Spiral, but the main problem with this card is that you have to be playing a deck where you don't get hindered by its downside, because unlike all these other hand traps, even unlike Lancia, which is sort of the opposite, you know, it's strict banishing instead of banishing everything, at least Lancia only stopped your opponent on their turn when you actually use the ability, but Dimension Shifter will also go into effect for your turn as well. This can be a major problem for the decks that are trying to play this card as a hand trap, and now that Thunder Dragons are out of the meta, which was like the most popular deck using this card, I just don't see this card being played that often. However, because I feel it is a good enough hand trap against Spiral, I feel like it'll be played in some decks and maybe just want to cheese some wins. It really does, sort of like one other card on this list, blank the entire Spiral turn. It pretty much prevents them from doing a combo at all, and if we get into a format where Spirals are super popular and like are completely tier 0, which I can't say right now if we're actually going to be there, but if we get to that point, this card could be a lot better. For right now though, I'll put it in the good but specific category. It is a good card, but you have to be playing a pretty specific strategy to actually take advantage of its effect. And then we have everyone's favorite rock monster, Nibiru, and no surprise here, I think this card is going to be very popular in the upcoming format. Is it the best best thing out there? I'm not really convinced. It seems like a fair amount of the time, not all the time, but a decent amount of time, spirals can actually play through Nibiru, whether or not that's by just having extra extenders or by just making Appaloosa by their 5th summon. It's really hard to tell, but I think Nibiru will be popular. It is still a very good generic anti-combo deck type of card, and if we enter a sort of a format where not only spirals are topping, but just other combo decks in general, Nibiru is a very good sort of non-specific way to beat those types of strategies. So I like this card a lot, and I think a lot of control players like this card as well for sort of wiping boards that they usually can't deal with. And then we have Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries. What a fantastic card against spirals a couple years ago when they were tier 0, but not so much anymore. You know, I don't think, this is kind of my stuff with Ghost Ogre as well, but the spiral deck right now does not seem to be super focused on double helix. It certainly is a very, very important link monster, don't get me wrong, but looking at the PPG, I don't think anyone cited this card, or at least not from the deck profiles I saw, and I'm just not seeing this card in the format. The spiral deck can do so many other things, even without having access to double helix. It's actually pretty crazy. I think the main sort of shift here is that double helix in the past was really important for actually getting the master plan on the board, but nowadays the entire deck is designed to get it in the grave and revive it before ever summoning a double helix. That means if you use the Reaper for the helix, it might screw them up a little bit, but they probably will do the exact same combo, or at least most of the same combo, even if you hit them with a Reaper, just because the deck is so resilient to most hand traps. This card is also particularly bad in formats that are kind of wide open, so if the format comes down to just like half spiral and then half a whole bunch of random decks, Ghost Reaper is just not going to be very good. So for that reason, I think it's going to be pretty unpopular in the upcoming weeks. Next up, we have Droll and Lockbird, and if you've been paying attention to the one event that we've had, as well as a lot of the talk that people have been saying about this upcoming format, you probably already know where this card is going to end up, and that is in the staple category. I will say when Droll and Lockbird is a staple, it's a little bit scary, because that means that people are playing the type of deck that wants to search like 10 plus times in a turn or 15 times in a turn, and that is not good for the overall health of Yu-Gi-Oh! Having Droll and Lockbird as a card that is available is good to combat those decks, but yeah, I really get worried when Droll and Lockbird is a staple card just because it does not bode well for the format. That being said, Droll and Lockbird just objectively is one of, if not the best hand traps against Spiral. It completely stops their turn. There is this tricky sort of balance where if everyone is main decking Droll and Lockbird, then decks like Spiral get worse. Maybe Spiral goes down in popularity and then Droll goes down in popularity, and there's sort of this back and forth. But at least for the upcoming weeks, I think main decking Droll and Lockbird isn't the craziest thing. I think we'll see a lot of people topping doing just that. And then we have Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, a very, very good card, but not quite a staple. You know, I'm going to put this in the popular category. Maybe that's crazy, but here's the thing about Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. It is really, really weak against most good Spiral players. They will be able to chain block the Master Plan Graveyard effect, usually with Barricade Borg blocker, but it is really, really good. So don't get me wrong, it's still in the popular category, but it's just not that good against what a lot of people are expecting to be the best deck of the format. That being said, Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring is extremely valuable against almost every single other matchup in the entire game, and for that reason, it'll likely still be very popular even if Spiral is the best deck. And then we have Infinite Impermanence, and I think that once again, this card, like Ash Blossom, you know, while it might not be as good against Spiral as other hand traps, it is just so good against almost every other matchup in the entire game that it still is going to be played a lot. For that reason, we'll put it in the popular category, because while this card might not be super great against Spirals, it's so useful in every other matchup. It's so versatile. You know, I've talked about this card a lot, but it really is one of the most skill-intensive hand traps out there. You know, you can do so much with it. You can use it just like Effect Veiler, sure, but you can do so much more, and I've talked about that in the past, so I won't talk about it too much here. But Infinite Impermanence, like Ash Blossom, even if they're not that good against the top strategy, they're just so good against the other matchups that unless we enter like a tier 0 format, Infinite Impermanence and Ash Blossom are both likely going to see a lot of play. And then we have Fantasma, you know, everyone's favorite super, super expensive hand trap, and I know not everyone owns this card, and that's perfectly fine, because while Fantasma is a very good card, it's also not a guaranteed form of interruption, which sometimes you really, really need. If you look at all the other cards on this list, they all do something immediately. You know, they interrupt the opponent. Maybe the one exception is like Spooky Dogwood, but that card's terrible, but all the other ones actually do impact either the board or what your opponent can do for that turn. Unlike Fantasma, which while it is a hand trap, you know, is technically under that category, you're not guaranteed to draw into something that you can actually play to stop your opponent's combo. When a deck like Spiral is running around and there's other decks out there that maybe don't play as any link monsters, sometimes it's just better to have a guaranteed form of interruption, or maybe just more starter cards in your own deck rather than having a Fantasma. I still think it'll be popular enough to make it into this category. I don't think it's that specific where people just won't play it at all, but it does seem to be going down in popularity. It's not the best card against Spiral. A lot of times you just rather have a Drone Lockbird or Didi Crow or something along those lines. This card's not going to be terrible. It's still going to be popular, but I do think it's going to go down in popularity. And if we were to remake this tier list like next month or in 2 months or whatever, I'm not sure if this card would be as high on the list, but at least for right now, it's still going to fall under that popular category. Anyway though, that's pretty much going to wrap up today's tier list video on all the hand traps for this month only, February 2020. Would you guys like me to do more tier lists? I mean, should I make one about decks? Should I make another one about back removal or cards for going second? There's a lot of different options for doing this, and I think sometimes it's easier to organize my thoughts with a tier list rather than just individually talking about each card, because this way you guys can see all the cards sort of compared to each other and sort of get an idea which cards you should play and which cards you should be prepared to play against. I'll see you later though. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.